Okay, so this will be part 3 of how to save yourself $40,000 to $50,000 off your helicopter ratings. One of the things I didn't actually talk about is actually going into the military. And the military is a fine option for if you want to be fly helicopters. In fact, about say 35 years ago, about 90% or greater of the helicopter pilots in the United States were trained within the military, and only about 5 to 10% outside of the military. And that all changed when Robinson brought out the R-22. It was a much more affordable helicopter. A lot of the training was done in there. And since the R-22 was brought out, you have Frank Robinson to thank for your ability to actually train outside of the military at a reasonable cost. So all of that changed a lot after the Robinson R-22 came out. But going in the military is still certainly a viable option. It's a great option, actually, if you can. If you're willing to spend, a few years in the military there. It's about a 6-year hitch, actually. Some of the downside of going to some of the upside of the military is you're getting all your training. Basically, you're working your way through and getting all your training. You're not incurring any debt when you're getting the training. About the only downside to flying helicopters in the military, and I found this kind of surprising myself, was the fact that you only fly about 100 to 150 hours a year in the military. So if you spent, 6 years in the military, you're going to come out with about 800 to 900 hours or so. And I just had conceptualized that people flying helicopters in the military were flying around all day long and that sort of thing. And the reality is that they end up flying about 2 to 3 hours a week, and that's about it. So 100 to 150 hours a year is about it. Here in general aviation, I fly 100 to 150 hours a month. So you're going to actually potentially could get a lot more hours outside of the military than you could within. But again, the military is an excellent option, and I would support anybody's decision to get going through the military. But the only other real downside to the military is it takes a bit to get into flight school. It's kind of a bit of a lengthy process, and usually takes somewhere in the neighborhood of about a year from the time you start the process to you're accepted to flight school and you're in flying. Another thing to consider is scholarships. There's actually more scholarships available than what a lot of people realize for aviation. If you look at the AOPA's aviation scholarship page, that's a good place to start. Actually, one of our students was a female helicopter pilot who had applied to several scholarships. She actually received a total of, I think, about 3 different scholarships. The downside to the scholarships is that the fact that it's kind of a lengthy process. Usually it takes a while to apply for it, takes a while to hear back. And according to the girl that got the multiple scholarships, that you usually don't get it the first time you apply. It's usually the second time you apply for it, or the third time you'll usually get it. But she had received 3 very substantial scholarships, and was able to pay for a very significant part of her training with scholarship money. So I'll put the web address up for the AOPA's aviation scholarship page, and that's a very good place to start, because if you start on that page, and I'll show you what that page looks like here. And if you start on that page, then you're going to see that there's links available to other industry scholarships, such as the EAA, the 99s, Whirly Girls, National Business Aviation, Women in Aviation. Women in Aviation administers a huge amount of money for scholarships every year. And despite the name Women in Aviation, there are some of those scholarships that you can apply for if you're male. I guess they don't all go to females, despite the name Women in Aviation. But anyway, worth taking a look at that. So when you're looking at that page, near the top of it, there's a link that says AOPA Flight Training Scholarships. It's kind of highlighted in blue. And that link will take you directly to the AOPA specific scholarships that they administer. And they give away about $1 million a year in scholarships. I think they give away, there's different types of them. There's some for high school students, and the high school student scholarship's about $10,000. They also have, I think, 80 of those, 80 of the high school scholarships. They have about 20 for high school teachers that are $10,000 a piece. Then they have a primary flight training scholarship if you have no rating at all and you're not a high school student or a teacher, and you just like some help obtaining your ratings. And I think those are anywhere from like $3,000 to $10,000. And then also additional ratings. So if you're adding on a commercial or an instrument, and again, those are different varying amounts, all of which are significant depending on what rating that you're going for. So again, that's a good place to start, and I would definitely take a look at those scholarships. You have to be an AOPA member, and I think the scholarships is closed for this year, but it would certainly be something that you want to take a look at and be prepared to apply for next year, as well as looking at all of the other industry scholarships that are available. Okay, so before we get into specifics on here, which is coming up next, I just want to remind you guys that if this is something you want to do, don't you let anybody talk you out of your dreams. All right, if your dream is to be a helicopter pilot, then you do it. You can accomplish this. All right, you only regret the things in life that you don't try and that you don't give it a go at. All right, when I went to medical school, I was in my late 30s. I had everybody telling me, you're too old, they're never going to take you. You were a paramedic and you were a nurse before that, and they don't like nurses and paramedics going into medical school. None of that was true, okay? So don't listen to all that crap that you're going to hear about. Oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. No, do it, all right? Again, you only regret the things in life that you don't do. If you try it and you give it a shot and it doesn't work out, okay, I know exactly what didn't work this time. We'll do something different. But you have got to give it a shot. If this is something you want to do, then do it. You can accomplish it. Okay, so I gave you guys several examples on what it would cost to get your license, depending on to what extent you want to go to. If you want just a commercial in your hand, that can be relatively affordable, somewhere between $30,000 if you can do mostly flight training in the R-22, and about $40,000 if you do flight training in the 44. But again, those are not huge amounts of money, and most people have the ability to actually borrow that sort of money if they have to. So once you get your license in hand, once you've got a commercial license in hand, then you can go to work as a helicopter pilot. All right, I'll give you an example right here. If we train you how to fly and you get your commercial with us, our insurance carrier will cover you for doing excursion tours. And so we have an LOA that we do local tours with, 15 to 30 minute rides. People like to go up over town, go out over, see the river, see the eagles, that sort of thing. And we'll hire you to do that. All right, it's a great way to accrue time, and you're actually getting paid for it. All right, so if you align yourself with a flight school that will hire you once you complete your training, then that's one of the best ways that you can ensure that you're going to get some flight time and actually get paid for it. It's not really going to cost you anything. I've never understood some schools that will train you, take you all the way through to your CFI, CFII, and gig you for over $100,000, and then they won't even rent a helicopter to you to go fly in after you've completed your training. I mean, come on, what's that say about the training you just got there? All right, that's not true here and in most flight schools. If you get your training with them and you go through your commercial and CFI, typically they'll hire you. The CFI turnover at most flight schools is relatively brisk because people typically will try to get their CFI and flight instruct for about as long as they need to and then move on to a better paying job. So frequently CFI jobs open up, right? So one of the best ways you can ensure yourself of getting some flight time that you actually get paid for and not have to actually dole money out of your own pocket is to train at a flight school that will hire you once you get done with your training. So that should be one of the questions that you ask when you go to a flight school. Is you should ask, how often do your students that train here move on to become flight instructors here, right? That's very important. If they're like, oh well, we require you have to have at least 1,000 hours to instruct for us or whatever, that may be something to think about. All right. There's no reason in the world you can't go to a school, go all the way up through get your CFI, and then go to work for them if a spot's available. And most of the time, a spot's available in a fairly reasonable amount of time. Not all the time, but often it is. One of the second questions you ought to ask is, and this is a very important one, is how am I expected to pay for my training? Okay, and what I mean by that is, are you allowed to just pay as you go? You come in, you fly a couple hours, be into that lesson, you write a check for it and go. That's the way you want to pay for your training, right? If anybody tells you, well, we expect our students to stay at least $5,000 ahead or $10,000 ahead on their running account, then just turn right back around and walk right back out the door. Because, you know, just because they're in business today doesn't mean that tomorrow they're going to be in business. And where did your $10,000 go? And if those of you that have ever heard of the word Silver State helicopters, you'll have an idea what I'm talking about. Silver State helicopters was a major fiasco that I'll probably do a separate video on that. But safe to say that people lost thousands of dollars paying money ahead with Silver State helicopters. Right? Another thing to consider doing is while you're still a student, pursuing your ratings is actually to work for the flight school that you're training at. And like I say, I'll use us as an example. We're a flight school, we're also a service center, and we're a dealership for Robinson Helicopters. We do a lot of maintenance on helicopters, right? And frequently in the past, I've hired students that were still working, pursuing their ratings, and to work in the shop. You know, we always need an extra set of hands, and it's a great way to learn all about helicopters. You're right there in the thick of things. You're working with one of the mechanics. You're helping to disassemble and reassemble the aircraft. You learn how the thing is put together, and it's a great way. It's a great learning experience. You can actually you can log the time that you spend working on helicopters, and you can there's a method to get your A&P rating with you keep a log of your hours and that sort of thing. So if you had any interest in becoming a mechanic, you can actually do it all on the job training, working for a flight school as well. And even if you don't want to go to that extent, it's still great training. You learn all about the helicopters. The best thing about that is that you're right here in the thick of the action. And frequently we'll have helicopters that need to be delivered. I've got to take the aircraft's been worked on, and where owner doesn't want to take the time to come get it, I'll end up having to fly it out to wherever they live and drop it off. And frequently I'll take a student with me. Well, guess what? Or whoever's working for us, the students that are working for us in the hangar. That's free flight time. And that's a great one. You get to fly a nice variety of helicopters, and it doesn't cost you anything. You actually get paid for it. And it's incidental to the job. It's not the job you're hired for, but you get free flight time. And that flight time is pretty valuable. So if you have a local flight school, a local helicopter school that's also a service center, man, that's a great way to get in there and get some experience with it. And you can get a lot of flight time that costs you nothing, and just a great way to get experience. So, okay, so I'm going to continue on. I think I'll call it a day on this one on part 3 here. We'll start off on part 4, and I've got a huge number of other ways that you can get flight time for nearly nothing. So stay tuned.